not go forward without mentioning one of the greatest ads that I remember in my childhood was Amitabh Bachchan coming and giving a PSA, a public service announcement about polio. And what was phenomenal about the power of advertising was that ad actually helped in such a mass appeal that it eradicated polio from India. Is that actually true?
Well, yeah, I'm not sure whether you can attribute the eradication of polio just to that campaign, because I'm sure there are not many things that happened parallelly and simultaneously. There were rumors at that time that this was like a insidious way of family planning.
Because that was also happening around that time. The Nasbandi campaign of...
So people were quite reluctant, many people, to take this on because of these fears that they had. And I think what happened was having a very credible celebrity like Amitabh Bachchan, to a large extent, kind of diluted that fear, and really eroded people's resistance to having this, gave that program a lot of credibility. And I think that was his the most significant contribution, and I think that opened the acceptability to getting that vaccine.
This is my theory, right? Like, if we were invaded by aliens and they walked into the copywriter's room at the Amul ad, place, and they came across this book, I think they would get a pretty accurate history of India.
Absolutely.
Because of this moment marketing. Right up till today, I mean, just 2 or 3 words and a print ad and the Amul girl. It's really iconic.
And some very bad puns, but
serves the purpose.
Ultimately it serves, and you're absolutely right, because if you look at some of the Amul ads, and I was going through some of them just this morning, they chronicle India's history.
Yes.
Correct.
Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of Don't Run Into Glass, a podcast hosted by thecitizen.in. I'm Gayeti.
And I'm Anica.
And Anica, what are we chatting about today?
Today we are chatting about the greatest ads made in India. And we have with us someone who has sort of seen the evolution of the advertising industry from when it used to be back in the Mad Men type of days.
Is that a true picture of the ad industry?
That's what I'm waiting to find out today.
Even honestly, I really want to know that.
Honestly, I really want to find that out. But we have with us Mr. Samit Sinha. And as a true copywriter, when I asked him for an introduction for him, he sent me a fairly long introduction, but it's riddled with many funny moments there. So I'm going to read it out. Bear with me, okay, everyone. Samit Sinha is a Delhi-born alumnus of St. Columba's High School and Hindu College who began his career straight out of college in 1982 as a clueless advertising copywriter. With some pluck and a lot of luck, he enjoyed long stints in account management and planning in 3 of India's leading advertising agencies, Lintas, Clarion, and eventually Mudra, where he was the chief operating officer before founding his own brand consulting practice in 2001. Over the last 42 years, he has worked with several blue-chipped Indian and multinational clients and immodestly claims a key role in the conception and inception of Indian brands and campaigns such as Atiti Devo Bhava, Ministry of Tourism, Government of India, Calabar Cosmetics, Encraft, Epic Skincare, Firefox Sports Bicycle, Gaia Health Foods and Supplements, Kama Sutra Condoms, Lava Mobile Phones, Open English General Interest Weekly Magazine, Opera, a potato crisp company, Pro Athletics, Sports Nutrition, Skinella, 24/7. We all love 24/7.
Survived off 24/7
that
for
hot
a
dog.
long period
That
of my
hot
life.
dog,
That
right?
hot dog, yeah.
At 3 a.m. 24/7 amongst others that he struggles to remember. Clearly, I mean, 42 years, right?
Yeah.
Somewhere it's got to give the age. Not being directly involved with the advertising industry for the last 2 decades does not stop him from freely sharing his opinions on advertising, sometimes unsolicited, with whoever cares to listen. To his utter astonishment, these views often get published. He also gets a guilty thrill teaching students in top grade business schools and training sharp corporate executives from across industries with considerably greater academic credentials than his own.
I love it. What a career.
What a
Like,
Oh,
career.
thank you. That was
Wow.
my pathetic attempt at being self-deprecating.
That's
no,
what we
I
love.
think you achieved the complete opposite. Like, we're in awe of everything you have done. Like, from, I think it's at Calabar to Kama Sutra condoms. I don't think you could have more variable
I think
projects to
it's
work
the
on.
42 years.
That's a long, long time. You don't look it.
Thank you.
So, congratulations on that. But
Thank you.
one of the things that when Gayeti and me were talking, right, we are really at this transformative age where advertising, and we've all watched shows like Mad Men. We've all watched.
Wait. First, how accurate is Mad Men?
Yeah.
Well, for the fact that it was set in New York in the 1960s, I think it's very accurate.
That's what I
And-
wanted to hear.
Yeah, and I think in the 70s or so in India, from what I understand, um, it was definitely aspirational to be that in the Indian advertising scenario as well. So I know a lot of people who are sort of wannabe Don Drapers.
Yeah. And I think, from that time to the times that we live in right now, where India has seen the shutdown of so many advertising agencies like JWT, which was pretty much the go to place. Any person who wanted to be in advertising wanted to work probably in JWT. And the evolution of digital media, digital marketing, advertising, influencer marketing, content creation, and now AI. I think one of the things that I am curious to find out right on the get go, what did advertising do in India that spoke towards popular culture in a very significant way?
So actually, to be honest, when I joined advertising, which was in 1982, um, it was quite classist. In fact, most of the advertising that happened of any significance was in English print, mostly newspapers. There were some magazines like the Illustrated Weekly and India Today was just coming up. So, in a sense, a lot of the advertising at that time was by the elite, of the elite, and for the elite. And I still remember anybody who was a non-English creative types was relegated to a back room and clearly was a second-class citizen. Advertising was conceived in English and was translated, and as you can imagine, much was lost in translation. It was very sad, but that was how it was. And 1982 was also significant because I don't know if you remember, but Delhi hosted the Asian Games
Right.
in 1982. That was also the first year.
This is
that
before we were born.
We don't remember.
Yeah, don't remind me.
No, but I only got reminded because when Commonwealth Games happened, they said they kept talking about how Asian Games were hosted in Delhi.
But from an advertising perspective, the significant thing was that it was the first time that there was color television
Ah, okay.
in India. And it's in the 80s, towards the mid 80s, where actually television started playing a role in Indian advertising. And after 1991, when we had satellite television, because before that it was just Doordarshan, and all ad agencies and all the companies that wanted to advertise on Doordarshan, they all used to line up to get onto Ramayana or Mahabharata. And when these programs were on, the cities looked like ghost towns
Yep.
because everybody was glued to the television. So it was a incredible achievement to actually get a slot on this single channel, on this single program. But by the 90s, I think we had many more channels, and that's when two things happened. Television really took off and started becoming the more dominant medium. I think print continued for a while, but that's when television came into its own, and also vernacular advertising which actually spoke to the masses, came into its own. So I've actually seen three very, very distinct eras. There was the English print era, then there was the television era, and now, of course, we're in the digital era where many of the rules that applied at that time no longer relevant.
Yeah. I can't not go forward without mentioning one of the greatest ads that I remember in my childhood was Amitabh Bachchan coming and giving a PSA, a public service
Yeah.
announcement about polio. And what was phenomenal about the power of advertising was that that ad actually helped in such a mass appeal that it eradicated polio from India. Is that actually true?
Well, yeah, I'm not sure whether you can attribute the eradication of polio just to that campaign, because I'm sure there are lot many things that happened parallelly and simultaneously. But I think, from my understanding, one of the issues with the polio vaccine was that there were a lot of apprehensions that people had. You know, they were um, scared of taking vaccines because they didn't know. In fact, um, there were rumors at that time that this was like a insidious way of family planning.
Because that was also happening around that
Happening
time.
then, yeah.
The Nasbandi
That's
campaign
right.
of, yeah.
So people were quite reluctant, many people, to take this on because of these fears that they had. And I think what happened was having a very credible celebrity like Amitabh Bachchan, um, to a large extent, kind of diluted that fear, and really eroded people's resistance to having this, gave that program a lot of credibility. And I think that was his the most significant contribution, and I think that opened the acceptability to getting that vaccine.
I think it's interesting how ads, and I'm not a person who remembers too many ads from my childhood. I have to admit that even now I'm like, skip. I still don't pay for the services where the ad-free services on YouTube and Spotify. I have to also admit that, but I skip or I tune out for that point of time. But I think there is such a powerful message that advertising can achieve. I want you to take us through maybe a few ads that you think are part of India's repertoire of India's greatest ads. Let's put it like that.
Okay, so let me give you a little bit of a context to this.
Yeah.
See, advertising finally is a communication force. Its primary job is to make people think, feel, or do something about something. And one would imagine that the best way to achieve that is to say it like it is. But we're human beings, right? We're complicated. And we don't quite respond to stimulus the same way. For example, if I wanted to convey to you that I'm very funny, I wouldn't say that, right? I wouldn't say I'm very funny, because you would pick up exactly the opposite. You'd think that was the unfunniest statement
To make, yes.
anybody would ever make. It's because you're seeing it through the filters of your own perceptions about how the world is. Or if I were to try and suggest to you that I was intelligent, which I'm not, but if I were, that's the last thing I would say, right? Because what you would decode from what I'm saying is that this guy's pompous, this guy's...
That's why you preface this with "I'm not," but we know you are. We know that to be successful in the ad
Honestly.
industry, you have to be intelligent.
So, which is why advertising doesn't work best by actually saying things directly the way they are. Of course, there are conditions. If, for example, I think there are 4 conditions in which advertising is effective. The first condition is that whatever it is that you're selling, whether it's a product or a service or a company or a concept, is absolutely unique. which is very rarely the case. In which case, you just need to put it out there and it gets picked up. The second scenario is when the audience for your communication is actually actively looking out for that information. So, which is why appointment ads or matrimonials work so well, because it's, you have the active participation of the audience who's actually going and seeking out those messages. And it pays to be completely direct in those cases. The third scenario, and which is what a lot of lazy advertisers with deep pockets do, is just rely on repetition. So you bombard the public with the message everywhere, and you do it long enough, and eventually you will penetrate.
True.
Right? Like Nirma,
Yeah,
washing
true.
powder, Nirma.
It
Eventually.
was
To
a
the
call
point that
tune.
you got sick of
It was a
seeing
call
it.
tune and an earworm.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
is. I mean, you
But
just can't
it's
escape
effective.
it.
You're right. It
You
is
can't
effective.
escape it, but
yeah.
it needs an incredible amount of money. But it's really the fourth condition where advertising really comes into its own, when none of the other three conditions are at play. Which means you're talking about a product that is not particularly unique, product or a service. The consumer or the audience is not actively looking out for it. You don't have a shit ton of money to burn. That's where your messaging and the way the messaging is packaged can make it very effective. So what we call creativity in advertising, is nothing but to be able to be effective with less money. That's what the purpose is. And honestly, before the 80s, there was very little competition. I mean, what can advertising contribute when you had to wait 10 plus years to get your Bajaj scooter,
Yeah.
or 8 plus years to get a telephone connection?
And that's because this is pre-liberalization,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So advertising actually had a very, very limited role in that time. So there were brands which had some degree of competition, for example, Unilever, etc. But it was a seller's market. So advertising really had a very easy time. It's only after liberalization, when you had multiple brands in the same category, is where people realized, hey, you're not going to sell just by being there. You need to be very relevant. You need to be highly differentiated. And you have to be able to put your message across very, very uniquely. And that's, I think, when Indian advertising came into its own. And there are most of the examples, in my mind, which really stand out for being very effective in that scenario. The one that comes top of mind is the Cadbury's campaign, the Cadbury Dairy Milk.
Yes.
Do you remember that?
Yes,
Where
on the
they-
cricket field,
That's
and
right.
then the girl comes
Yeah.
running
That's right.
onto the cricket field.
And
what was the
well,
the jingle? What was the jingle?
कुछ बात है, कुछ खास है.
Yeah.
कुछ-
Yeah.
Now, I mean, there are many ways of looking at that commercial, but if I were to put my finger on what really made it tick, so let me bore you with a little.
No, it's very
background
interesting,
to this.
actually. Go ahead.
So, when we were growing up, chocolates per se were not meant for adults in India. Chocolates were something that you took across when you were visiting somebody and they had children. So, that was the most done thing you took chocolates. And Cadbury's was pretty much the category. It was almost a generic for chocolates.
Yeah.
So that also created a problem, because when you're like some 70% or something of the entire category, how do you grow? You don't grow at the cost of other chocolates because there are hardly any. So you,
Kiss Me Bar was a pretty important chocolate.
well, yeah, but I mean, Cadbury's was so dominant.
Yeah.
Still
And the
is in a
only
way.
way for Cadbury's to grow at that time was actually to expand the category.
How interesting.
And expanding the category meant that you could no longer restrict yourself to just being relevant for children and as a gifting article, because worldwide chocolates are an indulgence for adults. But culturally, that was not the case in India. So what you had to do was somehow make chocolates acceptable and okay for adults to consume. But how do you make that transition from a product which is meant for children to a product that even adults can consume without guilt? So somebody found this it sounds very obvious in retrospect, but it was very deep inside that there's a child in everyone, every adult.
True.
So if I can address that child in every adult, then I can suddenly make this category really explode by making it relevant to adults. And that was the genesis
Yeah.
of the Cadbury's Cap. And it showed that, the carefree abandon of
But I also liked
an
how it
adult.
was a carefree abandon in a woman, who was essentially streaking
Yeah.
on a cricket pitch, on
That's
a
right.
cricket field,
Yeah. It was
when her
meant to be a
boyfriend.
demonstration of spontaneity.
Yeah.
And somehow magically everything came together. They had the right casting, they had the right setting, they had the right jingle. I'm not sure how much of that was scripted, but sometimes magic just happens. And it was one of those cases. It was truly magical. And even I think that came out in the mid-90s.
Yeah.
So 30 years later, when I mentioned this, everyone's ears perk up.
Yeah, people remember.
Yeah, remember that.
Yeah.
They remember every frame.
Yeah.
It
So
actually
that's an
gave a lot
incredible
of
example of.
it gave a lot of aspiration to us as young girls, because we felt like this girl in this long blue and red flowery dress
Yeah.
who was, going with her long hair, throwing the Cadbury.
Yeah.
All she
You
wanted to do-
really remember this ad?
I do, because
Wow.
A, I used to watch a lot of TV, but B, that was, as a young girl, looking at that woman streaking was like a really powerful moment for me as a kid,
Yeah.
And I don't know. I'm so glad
Yeah.
you made that
So
example.
that was also the time, coming back to what you said earlier, when frankly, a lot of the advertising was more entertaining than the editorial content that you got.
Yeah. Now the editorial content also tries to be equally entertaining.
Yeah.
But let's hear some more examples, because I feel like for me, this insight into advertising is very, very interesting, because you always understand the power of storytelling, and you always sort of appreciate it from a consumer's viewpoint. But to
Yeah.
hear what goes into the thought process behind it, I think that is just such valuable insight, and maybe useful for people who are getting into the industry or thinking of getting into the industry as well.
Yeah. So I have to admit that a lot of the wisdom that we have is in retrospect, because I'm not sure when, for example, the Amul campaign started.
Yeah, I think we all sort of talk about them.
It was in 1966, and it holds the Guinness World Record for the longest running campaign in the world.
Was it the milk ad?
No, the Amul butter, the
Oh,
utterly
yes.
butterly, the Amul girl.
The utterly butterly delicious.
It started in 1966. And it would be what today we would call moment marketing. I don't think that term existed at that time. And I don't think anybody, whether it was the client or Sylvester Dacuna, who created the first campaign, realized what an iconic campaign that was
Legacy,
going to
yeah.
become.
So iconic.
But it's something that everyone, multiple generations in India has grown up with.
Yeah.
And it doesn't seem to have lost its mojo.
Not at all. In fact, I wonder how they've
Um,
sustained it.
I feel this is my theory, right? Like if we were invaded by aliens and they walked into the copywriter's room at the Amul
Yeah.
ad, place, and they came across this book, I think they would get a pretty accurate history of
Yeah.
India because
Absolutely.
of this moment marketing
Yeah.
right up till today. I mean, just 2 or 3 words and a print ad and the Amul girl. It's really
Yeah, and some very
iconic.
bad puns, but
It
but
serves a purpose.
ultimately it serves. And you're absolutely right, because if you look at some of the Amul ads, and I was going through some of them just this morning, they chronicle India's history.
Yes.
Correct.
It's incredible, and they've sometimes been controversial, sometimes they've rubbed the right people the wrong way.
Yeah.
But I think they've also been extremely courageous, not just being able to tackle difficult, problematic topics, but do it without changing their format. Yeah, I think that's a brilliant example of advertising across generations.
Yeah.
I can't think of any other ad anywhere in the world that is probably like that Amul ad. Like from 1966 till now.
No wonder it's got the Guinness Book.
Yeah. It's,
Yeah.
Guinness record,
Yeah.
right?
It is
Yeah.
incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there have been campaigns, which have run for a long time, like the Marlboro Man, for example.
Yes.
The Michelin tire.
The cowboy. Yeah, and they've run for a long time. But nothing that looks as fresh today as I'm sure it did back in the 60s.
Yeah. And it's just a caricature. It's just a little girl in
That's
a
right.
few
And
words.
it's just a play on words.
Yes.
But
So the
it's
production
so
cost is.
instantly recognizable.
Yeah.
So there are many examples.
More.
A couple of more, yeah. This is a
Okay,
great-
so I have to say that it was really, as I mentioned, it was in the 90s that television advertising became dominant, and suddenly the role of somebody who could connect with the masses, as opposed to some sort of elite English. I have nothing against Don't School, but Don't School type was writing copy for basically his or her peers, and that's when you actually saw an explosion in a lot of Indian advertising, which is of, I think, international quality. The use of humor, celebrating Indianness,
Yeah.
being able to laugh at oneself.
My other favorite was celebrating Indianness was the Fevicol ads.
Yes,
You remember them?
completely. Because they were
Refresh. What happened in the
contextual.
Fevicol ads?
Fevicol
So
ads?
Fevicol, again, I mean, to be honest, Fevicol doesn't really have competition. So it has a very simple proposition, which is that, it does its job, which is it's an adhesive. So or it's a strong adhesive. But what they managed to do was take a very boring category, and otherwise boring. I mean, who cares about adhesives, right?
True.
And got the consumer involved. It's something that the carpenter uses, frankly. It's not something that, you and I would even choose. But we know Fevicol, and we kind of feel reassured, when the carpenter says some Fevicol laga hai. Because somewhere that, we have the image of
It
Fevicol, that it sticks. And they took it from a very literal sticks to a very metaphorical level of sticks. I'm sure you'll be able to play some of the
We'll play these ads.
Fevicol ads, and you'll see exactly what I mean.
My favorite were 2. I have to recount it because I'm just getting this surge of nostalgia. One was an auto But you know how in Republic Day parade on one bike there are like 17 people standing. So they were showing Fevicol ka jod, tootega nahi. So there's one auto, but there are like some 50 people just all over that auto, and it just says Fevicol ka jod.
Oh, nice.
The second one was a man taking a stick to the riverside.
Yeah, that was
and-
Feviquick.
Feviquick. And it's like introducing a new product,
Yeah.
right? And that was the introductory sort of
Yeah.
ad. He takes a stick and he goes, and just puts it in the water. And in 2 seconds comes out and 3 fish are stuck to it. He's like, I got my fish.
Yeah.
It was
They're
perfect.
incredibly memorable, and they were so incredibly fun. I mean, you can watch them over and over again. So talking about taking it from a literal to a completely metaphorical and sometimes ridiculous level, but it works.
It works.
There was one where there's a guy walking on the pavement, and you can see him walking, and you can see his shadow accompany him. And he keeps walking, and suddenly you see the shadow stuck. He's walking, but the shadow remains in one place, and then the camera sort of pans up, and you realize it's a Fevicol shattering. So that was great too. Then there were some Kelvinator refrigerator ads. If I don't know if you remember, they're like
Suddenly
they
you're
were
frozen.
really funny. Yeah,
Yeah.
It said it was the coolest one. So the whole this thing was, exaggerating to the level of hyperbole of what cool means. So you had dentures chattering in a glass, and you had somebody who suddenly learned Indian classical vocals.
This one I somehow remember. Like
do?
now that you're like
Yeah,
seeing
you
it,
can't,
it's like
yeah. I mean, you can't
visions of
unsee
it are
them
coming
if you've
back.
seen
I
them.
can't unsee it. Yes. This is wow.
Yeah.
It sticks.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then going back in time, I think the Air India Maharaja, I thought, it was one of the most effective mascots
Yeah.
ever created.
Yeah.
And for some inexplicable reason, they decided to drop it. I don't know. I mean, in the 80s or 90s, maybe they thought, it was like a colonial hangover or something. I don't know what the thinking was. But they really discarded their most important asset.
Yeah.
It's also appealing to the masses, right? Because
Not just that, it was so, it embodied
Air India.
and Indian hospitality.
Yeah, it did.
Correct.
And at that time, I think Air India was considered to be one of the airlines that you actually chose to fly internationally, not just for Indians, but even for people abroad, because it really represented luxury, it represented Indian hospitality, and it was so unique and so pertinent. And even today, people remember it. And you go on the internet and you'll find such clever advertising, which absolutely hits the spot when using the mascot. So that was one that I remember from the good old days.
The Hutch ad. No one remembers the Hutch ad.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh,
People started buying that dog after that.
I got
well,
that
yeah.
dog.
You got
By
that
then, I
dog?
think it had become Vodafone.
Yeah.
Became Vodafone. Yeah. And
And Vodafone also got those Zizou.
Yeah.
oh my God,
Yeah.
those Zizou so great.
They were so cute.
Yeah.
They were very Studio Ghibli,
great.
Yeah.
but yeah.
I don't know how many Vodafone connections that ad sold, but it sold a lot of pugs.
It sold a lot of dogs. For
It sold a lot of
sure.
dogs. That is very true. No, that dog suddenly became like
Yeah.
the dog everyone wanted to have.
That's right.
Yeah, that is. But what about ads today? Do you like now as a retired ad man, do you look at the ads today and sort of feel like Indian advertising's already had its golden age and we're on the other
it's
side
not
of
just
it?
Indian advertising, to be honest. I think the death knell of advertising, and when we talk about the era of advertising, when we talk about just sheer creative brilliance, individual creative brilliance. That died a death when the head of the largest advertising conglomerate in the world, a gentleman called Martin Sorrell, JWT being one of the brands, he said, "We are not madmen, we are mathmen."
Ah.
Interesting.
To be entirely fair, I mean, what he was saying had a context, because it wasn't entirely wrong. Because obviously, you don't want advertising to become self-indulgent. Because yes, it's a creative field, but it's not just a means of self-expression. At the end of the day, you're meant to sell something, even if it's just an idea. And there was a time when there was a lot of self-indulgent advertising, because advertising awards started becoming very important. And when your clients didn't quite allow you or give you a free hand in doing the kind of advertising that the agency wanted, because the clients had obviously a business agenda, and they wanted the advertising to be effective and have a commercial impact. What agencies started doing was they started releasing these ads which was purely for themselves and their peers and the awards jury. And just to satisfy a technicality, they would release it in some completely vague newspaper in some corner of India, which probably had a circulation of about 5. And then submitted it as a legitimate entry.
Yeah.
Just to win awards. I think it's possible that Martin Sorrell's reaction would have been to that self-indulgence which was actually creeping into advertising, not just in India, but the world over. But by doing that, he also at some level took the non-mathematical, the creative, the inspired process that really great advertising is out of it. And I don't think, and especially now with AI and all that, because it's very easy now, to trial and error. You put 20 messages out there and see which one sticks, and whichever one sticks, you do more of that.
Yeah.
I'm not entirely sure that you build great brands that way. You may get some traction in the short term, but I think great brands are built on a real emotional connect with consumers, and that emotional connect can only happen human to human.
Yeah.
And there's no guarantee that it'll work every time, but boy, when it works, it really works.
Yeah.
Like that milk campaign, right? All of us in our childhood.
Oh my God, that one ad I totally remember. I wanted to drink milk after that ad.
Pio glassful doodh, right?
Yeah.
And I mean,
Great ad.
obviously, India is one of the largest dairy industries of the world.
Yeah, I think it's the largest milk producer in the world.
Largest milk producer of the world, largest cattle production, largest cattle rearing. And then that ad of milk and how milk and dairy, really penetrated even communities that did not rely on dairy. For example, in South India, dairy does not play a very important role in their cuisine as it does, especially in North India, like Haryana and Punjab, and we have a cow belt and all of that. But milk became this jingle. I remember my mom singing it to me.
No, it was great. It was
There
really...
was also the similar thing was done for eggs. Sunday or Monday,
Rose cow ande.
Yeah.
Yes.
But the milk one was better.
Milk one was better, and obviously with milk came this entire market for Complan. I'm a Complan girl. I'm a
Wow.
Complan boy.
Thank you
Bonvita.
for reminding me.
Hmm.
One of my personal favorites. Look, I, ultimately this is going to be entirely subjective because it's very difficult. I don't think no two people will agree on what would be the greatest advertising campaigns. But one of my personal favorites is a Complan campaign of probably the mid 90s. I'm not exactly sure. Where it's a great example of how you can elevate the brand from just its functional attributes and take it to a level where it really makes a very, very strong emotional connect. So Complan is meant to be a milk food supplement. It's supposed to, because milk has a certain amount of nutrients. Complan is supposed to have 23 or something like that, vital nutrients. And they've always positioned it as a supplement that you give to children in their growing years.
Yeah. I was given that to take
yeah.
it to boarding
So I
school.
think,
And I hated it because all the other children used to get Milo and Bonvita. And my mom gave me Complan because of this fact. It was
Right,
not tasty.
right.
It was too nutritious at that age.
Well, yeah, but so maybe, you didn't have a choice in that.
Yeah.
But you had to address the parents.
Yeah.
Because there were many, many other, there was Bonvita and there was Milo and there was Boost and there was Horlicks and there were so many other brands. But the way Complan managed to take this positioning of for the growing up years and elevate it to a very, very poignant emotional connect was when they said that, look, children just don't grow up physically. When you are 5 and then, suddenly you become 12, you've also grown up mentally, emotionally, intellectually. So one of the devices that they used was, and it's a very common insight that we can all relate with, that when we meet our children every day and all the time, we don't realize that, that their shoes have become one size larger, or the trousers that they wore the year before no longer fits them. It's only then we suddenly realize when suddenly it's winter uniform time again. Oh, last year's trousers no longer fit. So it's to remind people that your children are growing up, which is something that we don't realize because we see them all the time. It's only when somebody's seeing them after a long time and say,
itna
oh,
bada ho gaya."
itna bada ho gaya. But there are moments in our lives when the child says or does something which strikes us as being a very adult emotion. And you suddenly say, hey, when did this child grow up? And so that there was let me try and describe it the best I can. It's a very typical Indian scenario. Busy father, he's coming back home after a work related to, presumably. And there's like a preteen daughter at home, and like always, he brings a gift. And this time, it's a doll. It has two things. One, that he hasn't realized that the child has actually gone past the
Doll
doll
phase.
age. So that's one. But as always, he remembers to bring something for the child, but not his wife. But now, the child has picked that up. The child has realized that this omission is going to hurt her mother. So, being a child, she does the best that she can. What she does is, she repackages the doll, puts a card on it, says to mommy from daddy,
Cute.
and leaves it for the mother. And then when the father realizes what she's done, I think it just tells the whole story. The child has grown up, but she's still a child.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think the folly of his ways.
Yeah.
Yeah. See, these moments to capture are super important, and I think they need that.
And
like
I don't
sort
think
of.
AI can do that.
No, I don't think so.
No.
Not yet.
And also, I think
I don't think ever, because, I can certainly, AI is very good at predicting behavior.
Hmm.
But we're not talking about just behavior here, we're actually talking about relationships.
correct.
And yes, I'm sure it's possible for AI to, for you to have a relationship with Siri or
With the amount that Gayeti talks to AI, I think they're
Yeah.
going to learn these things. I'm
they
been
will,
warning her.
but it'll still be a very good simulation. So I
No, it's scary how much AI can do. I was just telling
I know,
Anka I
I-
needed to walk for like 10 minutes, and I handed my daughter ChatGPT, and I just said, ChatGPT, my daughter is 3. You have to just play the shopkeeper game with her for 10 minutes. So
Yeah.
she played. ChatGPT
course.
played for 3 minutes
Of
or
course.
for 10 minutes with my
course.
3-year-old. But I think more than AI, like right now we're still at a point where like AI is definitely not replacing creative input. It gives very generic
It fills in the gaps
It fills
that
in
we
the
are too
gaps.
bored to fill in because
Yeah.
it's too generic
maybe in the
information.
future it
Yeah.
will, but right
Yeah.
now I think we're seeing even the lack of human input, really, because the ads that I consume are largely now on social media. So YouTube, for instance, sends me only targeted ads, so it knows what I'm already interested in,
Yeah.
and it'll only show me those ads. So very rarely do I discover a new product or a new idea. I'm usually just being fed the same thing in a
Yeah.
really lazy format.
Yeah.
And Instagram is even worse, because Instagram doesn't even you don't even bother with any form of storytelling. You just show me the product and an influencer or some pretty girl in Delhi telling me, oh, this is a product I use. And that's it. That's how far
Because
that
I
form
think
of
the
advertising
underlying
goes.
assumption here is that what people are looking for is something that is better, faster, cheaper.
Yes.
That's not always the case.
It's not.
Yeah. And I think, something that when we were talking about, really in this transitional, transformative age, the human touch is now being, do you think, actually, let me pose it as a question, do you think the human touch is being used a little bit more because advertising is now transitioning into digital marketing and marketing in general, where people are the advertisers now, the influencers, the
That's right.
content creators.
That's right.
Thus, what advertising used to communicate is the human emotion and kind of speaking to a core emotion or a core memory or a core or ambition,
Or a deep insight.
here it's replacing it with, I recommend this, I use this, look at what it's done to me.
Yeah.
So what's that doing to the world of advertising that had this sort of sense of purity of intent of speaking to the people deeply, as opposed to giving examples of user base and user experience? Now, do you think it's moving in that direction?
So, okay. So let me not sound like I'm making a value judgment. I'm not. But these algorithms work on determining what are the kind of stimuli that gets you the maximum response. And it's predictive because it's based on a large amount of data. Over time, it knows that if you do X, Y, Z, you get ABC results. And that works by and large quite well at a macro level. But what it also does is, over a period of time, it just feeds you. It feeds into your prejudices. It deepens your biases. And it only tells you what you want to know. So it validates your own conceptions or misconceptions, whether it's news or advertising. But like I said, it doesn't create, to my mind yet, and I'm being very cautious when I say yet, deep and meaningful relationships with the brand. Because if somebody else comes up with a better proposition,
Yeah. I'll shift.
you'll shift.
In a heartbeat.
You'll
Yes.
shift. That's not the case with brands that were built earlier, which were actually built, through I would say a deeper human connection. It's not replicable. Sometimes you just get it by accident, it's serendipity.
I mean, there's still some ads that I like. That I saw a Nike ad recently, and that Nike ad was making the message, was making the point that to really get something in life that's worthwhile, you have to struggle, and sometimes the beauty is in the struggle. So it was a
Yeah.
running campaign,
Yeah.
but it had that powerful message of like, hello, the struggle is also important.
Absolutely.
You know,
But then Nike is a brand which has been around for at least 4 decades.
yeah,
And their whole DNA is about being able to surpass mortal limitations
yeah.
to win. And they celebrate that aggressive, no holds barred, no hostages taken kind of attitude towards winning. They have lines like, you didn't win silver, you lost gold. In life, winning isn't everything, is the only thing. But that was not created by a computer.
No, it
Yeah.
wasn't. I think one of the points that we can't get away from is also the cost of it, right? Like now today, if I'm a brand that's starting out, I
That's
can't
why-
afford
That's why no
a
value
TV
judgment. I
ad.
don't blame anybody. It's inevitable. And,
It's inevitable.
change is inevitable. You got to embrace it. You got to find ways to be creative even within this milieu. And it's possible. It's just that I know that a lot of people who grew up in a different paradigm
Yeah.
are struggling. But, I mean, it's their funeral. You can't stop evolution.
You can't stop evolution. I think I wish we saw more creativity in the format of ads that are coming out,
Yeah.
instead of sort of
Yeah.
mourning a format that just doesn't
Yeah.
like work
Because,
in
I
today's
think
world.
people have relegated their kind of, responsibility.
Yeah.
Yes.
Saying, the machine will do the job for me.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is sad.
Templates, like,
Absolutely.
for a shoe brand, you'll
Which
see
is sad.
shoes and you'll see different people wearing the shoes, and then you'll say, okay, buy the shoes in a swipe up
Yeah.
link.
And
you'll
why
see
do I
that for
need
any
to think
product.
so deeply about this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can put it out there, it costs nothing,
Yeah.
and I'll get immediate feedback, and I know what's working and what's not working, and I'll discard the ones that are not working.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Well,
sad from my point of view, but
true.
inevitable.
I can't help myself and ask this question. But while we're talking about some of the greatest ads made in India, I also want to ask you, what are some of the cringiest ads made in India? My favorite have always been these Jandubam ads,
Well, there's one which I think would, in today's time, would be deeply problematic.
Which one?
I just came across an Usha sewing machine ad.
Okay.
It says, teach your wife how to be a good housewife. Something like that.
I bet there's some golden nuggets from
No,
that time.
the other day I went into the theater and I saw these Kaj Khujli ads just going on and on television, on the
big screen.
And I was like, I can't watch this man scratch his groin one more time.
Yeah. I mean, that's makes you cringe for a different reason. But this made me cringe. Oh my God, what were they thinking?
But this is from what time? Like, it can't be now.
Well, this is a black and white ad, so
Ah.
I presume it was a newspaper ad.
But there are
sometime in
these
the-
great chronicles of like the sort of patriarchal ads of like the 40s and 50s.
Yes.
But advertising also speaks to the times. And like, you had a fairly
Yeah.
different society back then,
So-
and you have a different society
So on
now.
that topic, let me do a little bit of, blowing my own trumpet.
Please do.
So, this was 91, 92, liberalization had just happened, and the Singhanias, this is the Bombay Singhania, who's been in the news for all the wrong reasons, wanted to launch a brand of condoms. And Lintas was the agency, and I was the account manager at that time on the account. And, condoms before that were a product that nobody spoke about. It was part of a family planning campaign, which I think did more damage to the cause of family planning than anything else, because they made this look like a bitter medicine.
Yeah.
And it was literally given away free to people, and despite that, nobody used it. So in that scenario, somebody's going to come up with a condom and actually get people to pay a hefty premium for it. So we had to, it was a very fine line that we had to walk, because we realized that, you can't sell condoms if they continue to have that medicinal, unsexy image, because people will find many other workarounds, so how do you actually get them to use condoms? So again, in retrospect, it's quite obvious. The whole idea was is there something we can do to change the image of condoms from being a turn off to a turn on?
Yeah.
Suddenly condom ads became very sexy and steamy.
Yeah.
But
all condom ads
you had
now.
to also go against the prevailing social norms, which was that time, whenever it came to sex, it was all about, I'm sorry to use a very bad pun, but beat about the bush.
Yeah.
So here was an ad that had to get straight to the point and make it very sexy. And that's how the whole idea. So one of the strategies was to somewhere link it back to your own heritage.
Really? How did you manage to do that?
Kama Sutra.
Kama
Kama
Sutra.
Sutra. Oh, yeah.
So that, say, hey, listen, we didn't invent this.
Is this the genesis of Kama Sutra?
Yeah.
Oh my God. Okay, that's a cool story.
Yeah. So then, of course, the rest is history. But it also made Pooja Bedi into a pin-up girl. It kind of brought sex and sexuality and eroticism out of the closet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we are putting it back.
We're putting it back.
Yeah.
It's
And
happening.
that was an era also, right? This was the same time when the Limca ads were becoming really popular.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And it was
Yeah.
like
there were some risque ads.
risque ads, like
that came
Limca
out
was
that
one
time.
of them, where you had Deepika Padukone
Yeah.
under a waterfall.
There was one
And then
ad where
Deepika
Milind
Padukone
Soman
show.
and-
yeah. But reflecting society, changing society, I really want to talk about one of the most epic print ads I ever saw in
Anica,
India.
this is the last ad you can talk about, because I think you could go on for the next half an hour.
But I can't end this episode without talking about this ad. It was sometime around 2016 or 17 or 18, one of the years. The front page of Times of India and other popular newspapers had Pierce Brosnan holding a pan Paraag or something like that. And that was really the
Even
peak
I
of
remember
his
this, yeah.
career, right? And I just couldn't get how this happened and how James Bond is holding, and in proper James Bond garb
Yeah.
was holding this. It was
It's called Gutka Money, by the way.
It just,
Gutka money is the
it
most-
just shows. What's that line from Dylan?
from
Money doesn't talk, it swears.
It's, yeah.
Obscenities.
But even I almost thought Pan Parag was cool after seeing that. And
Really?
Then, I mean, Pierce Brosnan, they got him at the height of his popularity. Like,
Man, Zuban
not that, I
Kesari-
mean, I'm not saying I would ever consider consuming it, but I was like, wow, this
Did
must
you in
be a
your
cool
wildest
product.
dream imagine that he actually consumes that product?
No.
Okay. Right.
But it was during also COVID. I think these Gutka, Pan Parag, these Kesar, whatever brands that even COVID could not put them down, because right after that COVID happened, and Zuba Kesari first on all the Indian highways, while we go from Delhi to the hills, you would see first Ajay Devgan. Then it was Ajay Devgan and Shah Rukh Khan the next year.
Yeah.
Then it was Ajay Devgan, Shah Rukh Khan, and one more guy. I think Tiger Shroff also came into the picture.
There was another big. Was
Yeah.
it Salman?
No, I think it's Ajay Devgan, Shah Rukh Khan, and one more really big.
Akshay.
Akshay Kumar.
Yeah.
I mean, the biggest,
Yeah.
most expensive.
Oh, they're not short of money.
Yeah.
Most expensive, and on big billboards.
No, I think P.S.
So-
Brosnan is such a good example, like, because that ad came out when we were children. Like, we didn't even realize, like, I don't think I realized the power of just like paying someone to do what you want, right? When you saw a celebrity endorsement at that age, you took it a little bit more at face value. Now, of course, you realize that there's a lot more to it
yeah,
than
that
that.
reminds me of, the person that I look up to the most in advertising was again in the Mad Men era, a guy called Bill Bernbach. And he said a thing that's always stayed with me. He told his team, we don't have a lot of money. That's why we have to think.
That's true, actually. It's like maybe the paucity of funds and the,
Yeah.
like Star Wars.
Yeah.
So necessity is
episode
the
4,
mother of invention.
The best sort of like Star Wars episode is when like they didn't have the funds
I
to
think you're at your most creative when there are constraints.
limitations. Yes.
Yeah.
So on that note,
On that note, I think this was such a fantastic walk down memory lane.
Thank you.
And such an
It was fun
ode
for me.
and such an ode to the power of the writer and the power of the conceptualizer, the power of the creative in speaking to masses in such a significant and simple way. Now I think nothing has spoken more deeply to an entire nation or a culture more than advertising. No book, no pun, no political speech. It has been advertising. And it is actually a bit sad to see it slowly sort of fading away in this hyper content oriented digital world.
That's how I console myself, telling myself that it's not just about making people feel inadequate. It also sometimes does some good.
yeah, let's end on a positive note.
I'm feeling sad.
No. There's still nuggets of good advertising out there, and
No, I'm sure. Because it's communication, and communication, I think, can change the world.
And I think we're going to see something. I think we're going to see these new mediums forced to become more creative, because even now they need to learn how to
I think so.
differentiate.
I think we're still seeing a
Yeah.
kind of a 1.0.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think definitely.
And I think that whole culture of content creation, influencer marketing is also evolving into
It
other
is.
things.
It
Like
is.
now we are seeing, but we're also seeing sort of other big industries like the print media or the magazine industry sort of fall prey to this new industry.
Yeah,
that
they're
is
becoming more niche.
Yeah, I mean, yes, and you're seeing also, I mean, one of the sad things that I'm seeing after what I am calling kind of the slow death of advertising is also the slow death of the editors. You're seeing larger publications not have editors, but people with a different sort of voice.
Today, any keyboard warrior is an ad guru and
Correct.
and an editor
Correct.
and a
Yeah.
journalist.
Yeah.
It's true.
So you wanted to end on a positive note? What was that?
I don't know. You guys have really
Hijacked.
dejected me.
Bummed you out.
But no, I still think there is a positive note. I feel like we're seeing a crisis in the media. I mean, definitely, I come from a journalist background, and we're definitely facing that from the editorial point of view. We're seeing a crisis in advertising, but out of crises is born opportunity. And I think we're going to see a shift, because you're consuming that same ad over and over again. Someone is going to have to figure out how to differentiate themselves.
I agree with you. I think we're just seeing the first flush of this new toy.
Yeah.
It will settle
Yeah.
to something better. What it is, difficult for me to say, but it will.
No one knows yet, as far as the media, traditional media is, look, the internet and AI are huge disruptors.
Yeah.
And now the industries need to catch up. They need to innovate.
Yeah.
So this is forced innovation.
Yeah.
Let's see what they
And
come
we
up
need
with.
more creative people in tech
Yeah.
rather than the other way around.
Correct.
There will
Okay.
be a balance. On that note, thank you so much.
You're welcome. It was great fun.
Yeah. And I
And
mean,
Anika, how many ads do you know? Is that all you do?
actually, you know what?
She
I'm
shocked
married.
me.
I've married a person
Yeah, that's true.
who shows me a lot of these
You're
ads.
cursed now.
I have to stop him half the times
He
from
shows you
showing me.
ads. Are you sure it's not just memes? Because on Luke's Instagram, all I see are memes. Like there are 100 different memes that he posts every single day.
Yes,
And you're
Luke.
like, how does one human being consume so many memes?
Yeah, no, Luke also does take out time to show me some of these greatest ads in his most creative moments when he misses the agency life as well. So
Oh.
yeah, sorry to go
No,
down
that's
this
okay.
nostalgia part, but I just couldn't help myself. It was, yeah,
Well,
it
was
was
it
like
okay?
it was great,
Yeah.
and thank you so much for joining us.
Pleasure.